Sir, are you in there? Open up, baby. The dimly lit apartment hallway smelled of mold and burnt breakfast. What little light there was filtered through a window at the end of the hall that hadn't been cleaned in a decade or more. The place was disgusting, and I'd been in 100 apartment buildings just like it, scattered all across this city. I'd walked into them after ducking under crime scene tape or signing in with a uniformed officer tasked with recording the comings and goings of all police officers and forensics people. I'd walked into apartments much like my daughter's to see the signs left over from moments or sometimes years of violence. Blood splatter on the walls, knives protruding from flesh, toppled furniture and smashed dishes and ransacked rooms. And it was my job to put the pieces together, as much as they could be put together anyway. There was no bringing the dead back, no gluing back together shattered lives. These places always smelled of blood and fierce sweat. They smelled of desperation and degradation. As I banged on my daughter's door, I thought I could smell the telltale olfactory signs of recent violence coming from inside. Please God, no, I thought. Not her. A door opened down the hall. I turned to see a big man in a stretched and stained wife beater. Patchy facial hair doing nothing to hide his only a mother could love face.
Would you shut the hell up? Some of us are trying to sleep.
I didn't comment that it was 10 in the morning. I didn't even raise my voice. Sir, please go back into your apartment.
I'll go back into my apartment as soon as you stop banging on that goddamn door.
I turned toward him and lifted my suit jacket, revealing a pistol and badge.
Fucking cops,
the guy grumbled, retreating back into his apartment and shutting his door. I knocked once more. When I heard nothing, I pulled my keys out of my pocket. Serenity didn't know I'd had a key made for her place. It was a trust thing, an independence thing. She wanted to be out on her own. It was the same reason she wouldn't let me help pay for a better apartment in a better part of town. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. There were no immediate signs of violence. That was good. Moving into the tiny one-bedroom, I called out her name softly. Serenity? Even her name was kind of a cruel joke. Her mother had chosen it, hoping that things would be different for our daughter. That the name would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Name a girl Serenity, maybe she'll grow up to be serene and confident and successful and all those things people want their children to be. But it didn't work out that way. Serenity inherited her mother's mental illness, making life a struggle almost from the get-go. And I was afraid that she would end up taking the same way out as her mother. I didn't think I could bear that. But the apartment was empty. There was no sign of my daughter, which was strange because I found her wallet and cell phone and her favorite pair of shoes. Her laptop computer, one I bought her 3 years ago, was open on a rickety card table. The screen was black, a white cursor blinking in the top corner. I moved over to it, brushing a finger across the touchpad. Suddenly, the whole screen flickered and went dark, as if it turned off. Hitting the power button, I tried to turn it back on. Nothing happened. Picking up her phone, I pressed the side button and saw all the notifications for missed calls and unanswered texts I'd sent over the last day and a half. I was the only one who'd contacted her, according to the phone. She had a hard time making friends. When I tried to unlock the phone, it asked me for a password that I didn't have. I thought about how I'd found Serenity's mother when she decided she'd had enough. How her body looked, lifeless, like another victim at another crime scene. Only the perpetrator was her. The thought made my legs weak, and I had to sit down on the bed. Serenity knew how hard that had been on me. She wouldn't want me to be the one to find her if she decided to kill herself. I was sure of that. So I pulled out my phone and called Fred Rizzo at dispatch. Fred, I said when he answered, have there been any Jane Does found in the last 2 days?
Hey, Mike,
Fred said.
How you doing? Let me check.
I heard him clacking on the keyboard.
Yeah, 2. One pulled out of the river and one found in a dumpster.
You got a physical description?
Sure. The swimmer is described as having green and black hair, bunch of tattoos, brown eyes, early 30s. The other one, a redhead, pale skin, freckles, green eyes, early 20s.
I breathed out a sigh of relief. Neither was Serenity. Okay, thanks. Do me a favor, and let me know if you see any other Jane Does come in.
Sure. What's this about? Your daughter?
Yeah, she's missing. Could be nothing, but I got a bad feeling. Fred breathed heavily.
All right. You gonna put out a bolo? I can do that for you if you want.
Yeah, please, I said, and described my daughter. Mid-20s, short, dirty blonde hair, olive skin, green eyes, slender. As I was talking, I noticed a loose baseboard at the wall. When I had hung up with Rizzo, I got on my knees and pulled the baseboard back, revealing a small hole in the wall. There was a slender black device tucked into the hole, an external hard drive. I grabbed it and stuck it in a jacket pocket. Then I closed her laptop and stuck it under one arm before heading out and down to my car on the street. It was only when I got to the car that I realized I'd left Serenity's phone in the apartment. I thought about leaving it in case she came back, but deep down, I didn't think she was coming back. I needed a clue about where she had gone and what she had done to herself. I feared suicide, but I knew it could be something else. Leaving town to try to start fresh somewhere else. Or maybe she'd suffered a mental breakdown and was wandering the streets. Whatever the case, I needed to know. Back on the third floor, I pulled my keys out and headed towards Serenity's apartment. But as I reached it, I noticed that the door was open a crack. I knew I locked it on the way out. Putting the keys back in my pocket, I pulled out my SIG pistol and pressed myself against the wall next to the door. Down the hall, the combative man's door came open, swinging slowly and soundlessly on its hinges. The man stood in the entryway beyond the door, still wearing his wife-beater shirt and grimy sweatpants. But his face was a contorted mess, his eyes overlarge and pure white, his grin stretching from ear to ear, his sharp and bloody teeth clacking together faintly. Sucking in a frightened breath, I raised my gun on instinct even as I backed away. Bullet holes suddenly appeared in the man's chest, 3 of them in quick succession. But I wasn't firing. There was no noise. Still, the man stood there, clacking his teeth together as blood spread across his shirt. I tripped over a garbage bag in the hall, falling back and landing hard on my ass. When I looked back up at the door, it was closed. The man was gone. Getting to my feet, I blinked, thinking I was going crazy. But the door to Serenity's apartment was still open a crack. It hadn't been forced. There was no damage to the door or the jamb. And when I went inside and cleared the place, there was no one there. But her phone was gone. The one thing I came back to get was nowhere to be found. Can you get inside? The computer forensics specialist, Wesley Richards, nodded.
It may take me a little while, but I can do it.
He'd just looked up the hard drive I found in Serenity's apartment. It was encrypted, but I figured if anyone could get into it, it was Richards. Good, I said. But do me a favor, and don't go snooping around inside any more than you have to. I want to take a look at this first. Wesley nodded again. This wasn't strictly legal. Sure, Serenity was my daughter, but she was still an adult. But Wesley owed me one and had agreed to do this job under the table. He'd already gotten into her laptop and connected it to the Wi-Fi. I took it over to an empty desk in the office Wesley shared with another computer forensics specialist. The background of the desktop was a picture of our family, the 3 of us, back when times weren't so bad. I looked at the various programs on her desktop home screen. One in particular caught my eye. It was a Tor browser. I had encountered the dark web on more than one investigation, but I'd never imagined my daughter had any reason to access it. I opened the browser and looked around for a way to access the browsing history. I didn't find a way, and I hadn't really expected to anyway. Tor probably didn't keep a history of the websites you visited. That would kind of defeat the purpose of the Tor browser. The next hour ticked away as I searched in vain on Serenity's computer for any indication of where she'd gone. I would let Richards take a look at it to see if he could work his magic, but I was done. I was just about to close the laptop when the screen suddenly blinked twice and then went black. A white cursor appeared in the top left corner. "Do you want to die?" The words appeared on the screen one letter at a time, but in quick succession. The cursor blinked just to the right of the question mark. I put my fingers on the keyboard and typed, "Who is this?" The words didn't show up on the screen. The cursor jumped to the line below and then typed out, "If you do not want to die, stop what you are doing." "Where is my daughter?" Again, I hit the keys, but the words didn't appear on the screen. A face appeared out of the blackness of the screen, getting larger as if it was flying toward me. It was the same face I'd seen on the man back at the apartment building. Tilted white eyes, disturbing grin, sharp and bloody teeth clicking together. It pressed against the screen, which bulged out toward me.
Jesus!
I shouted, jumping up from the desk and backing to the wall.
What's wrong?
Richards asked. My eyes darted up to him and then back down to the computer. The screen was back to normal, the desktop showing a picture of me, Serenity, and her mother, all of us smiling. I must be going nuts, I thought.
Nothing. Just a spider crawled across the computer.
Richards looked at me like he knew I was lying, but he turned his attention back to his computer. There was a ding, and he said,
"That spider has good timing, I guess. Decryption program's done. Come take a look."
I shut the laptop and moved around from the other desk as Richards stood up. He gave me a quick rundown on how to access the files, and then he said he was going to lunch.
"Be back in an hour. If someone comes in here and finds out what you're doing, I'll deny everything."
"Yeah," I said.
"Thanks, Wesley."
As soon as he was gone, I got to looking through the files on the hard drive. One of them sent chills through me. It was labeled, "Escaping the Game." I felt suddenly sick. I was transported back to that day years ago, once again racing home, lights flashing and sirens blaring. I just received a text message from my wife. It was a short one, reading simply, "I don't want to play anymore, Michael. I'm sorry. Please don't let Serenity see me. She can't handle it, but I know you can. Tell her I love her. I love you both so much, but it's time for me to escape the game." That was it. It was the only thing she left as a suicide note. As soon as I saw the text, I ran out of the interview I'd been conducting with a possible murder witness, calling Lenore's phone repeatedly as I raced home. She never picked up, and by the time I got there, it was too late. Back in the present, I shook my head. With a trembling hand, I guided the mouse to the file titled "Escaping the Game" and clicked it. It was a text file with a dark web website address and a list of instructions underneath. I read them repeatedly and then pulled out my phone. I snapped a couple of pictures of the instructions and then copied the .onion address. I navigated over to the Tor browser on Richard's home screen and went to the dark web website. I didn't believe a word I read on the website. It was too fantastical, too ridiculous, too impossible. But there was an address there, a street address. I punched it into my phone and saw that it was just 30 minutes away. Taking the hard drive and Serenity's laptop, I rushed out of the office and down to my car. As I drove to the street address, I felt like I was once again rushing home to try and stop my wife from killing herself. Only this time, it was my daughter. But like last time, I had a feeling I was going to be too late. The building was an abandoned hospital near the river. Despite the barbed wire-topped chain link fence surrounding the structure, there was graffiti here and there on the brick building. While the windows of the bottom 2 floors had been boarded up, many of the dirt-obscured windows on the 2nd and 3rd floors were broken. The instructions didn't say how to get inside, only that I had to. I drove around to the back of the parking lot and left my car there. It didn't take me long to find a small section of fence that had been cut to allow entry. I thought about Serenity crouching on the cracked asphalt next to the fence, using wire cutters to gain access. Was her body inside the brick building? Was she sprawled in a similar position to her mother's final pose? Her death pose? I couldn't bear the thought, but I had to find out. As I crawled through the gap in the fence, I experienced a faint hope that what I'd read on the dark web was true. It would make things easier, although not by much. Still, the implications would be too much to handle. But at the same time, if it were true, it would provide a sense of calm that I desperately wanted, an end to all the questioning. But of course, it wasn't possible. I found a loose board covering a back doorway and slipped inside, into the damp darkness of the abandoned hospital. The instructions said to go to the basement. Why did it have to be the basement? Using the flashlight on my phone, I moved through the first floor halls, looking for the door to the basement. I heard nothing other than my own breathing and footsteps on the rubble-strewn floor. I left my gun holstered, doubting there was anyone in the place with me. Anyone alive, anyway. I found a stairwell and headed to the basement. The instructions said there would be a series of challenges when I got down there. I didn't know what that meant. Pushing through the door to the underground level, I shined my light around. My heart suddenly started beating rapidly in my chest.
"Serenity?"
I said, hardly able to get my voice above a whisper. The instructions said that if you were able to get past the challenges, you should go to the double doors at the end of the hall, the morgue. The hallway seemed to stretch out before me, doors standing open on rooms flanking the hall. I put my hand on my pistol, still in its holster, and moved hesitantly down the hall. Something moved in the darkness beyond the first doorway on my right, something big. Pulling my gun out and spinning that way, I saw the tilted and overlarge white eyes first. They were on a large face that was near the ceiling, 7 or 8 feet off the ground. As I got my flashlight around, I brought more of the creature into view. It was a grotesque monster with a vaguely human body, skin cracked and red. There was no mouth in its distorted face, just a stretch of burnt-looking skin. Moving swiftly on hoofed feet, it closed in on me, a large and vertical mouth opening in its chest, bloody teeth inside clacking together. Screaming, I backpedaled into the open room behind me, tripping over debris and falling onto my back. The creature loomed over me, that vertical mouth opening wide. I fired the gun 3 times, and the thing flickered out of existence like the picture of an old and failing television. I scrambled to my feet and ran out of the room, back to the stairwell door. As soon as I wrenched the door open and stepped through, I thought about the challenges mentioned in the instructions. Stopping my panicked flight, I paused and took a deep breath. Turning around, I opened the stairwell door and stepped back into the dark hallway. I holstered my weapon and took another deep breath. Then I started walking, slowly and steadily, down the hallway. A 6-legged creature the size of a tiger, made entirely of severed human limbs, came running out of one doorway, moving swiftly toward me. I could hear its feet, severed human feet, slapping the floor as it came. I shut my eyes and waited. The sound grew closer and then stopped. When I opened my eyes, there was nothing in the hallway. I moved my light around and saw no other creatures. With my theory verified, I moved swiftly down the hall toward the double doors. When I pushed them open and stepped through, I screamed at what I saw. My dead wife stood directly before me, body rotting and eyes pointing in different directions. She grabbed me with frigid hands and yanked my face toward hers. She kissed me, mouth open. I felt the wriggling of dozens of small worm-like creatures against my lips. Panicking, I pushed her away, seeing the maggots spill out of her mouth as she stumbled backward. Retching, I spit out the few maggots that had wormed between my lips to the ground. Again, my first and strongest reaction was to flee, but I fought it. I looked at my wife, not shying away from her grotesque appearance. She stood there for a moment before flickering out of existence, along with the maggots. I moved deeper into the morgue, just like the instructions said to do. As I swung the flashlight beam around, I saw it. The ancient computer, sitting on a dusty desk. The screen was black, except for a white cursor that blinked in the top left corner. So it's true, I thought. It's true. My daughter found a way to escape the game, but she did it in a way that my wife never could, a way that I'm sure my wife was never aware of. I pulled the flimsy office chair out from under the desk and sat in it, and I stared at that blinking cursor for a long time, going over what I'd read on the dark web, making my decision. I thought about all the misery I'd seen, all the death and hatred and disregard for human life. I thought about the news headlines, tens of thousands dead in a flood in the Middle East, earthquake kills hundreds, dozens dead in a mass shooting. I thought about wildfires and pollution and corruption and the never-ending quest to exploit others to make a profit. And I made my decision. I opened the picture I'd taken of the instructions and propped my phone between the monitor and the keyboard. There was enough light coming from the phone that I could see the keys. I followed the instructions of the letter, putting in my full name, date of birth, and social security number first. Then I entered the strange phrases and seemingly random assortment of letters, numbers, and symbols from the instructions I'd found on my daughter's hard drive. 10 minutes later, I was done. All I had to do was hit the enter key to erase myself from existence. The fact that I'd been living in a simulation my whole life was at once surprising and also, in a way, wholly predictable. If it was a simulation, the rules were very clear, and there was no getting around them. Not unless you wanted to escape. I was under no illusion that I would wake up in the real world. The dark web website I'd read made that very clear. I was simply a program. There was no physical body somewhere beyond the bounds of cyberspace. No real me. I wasn't the only real person stuck in a game with a bunch of other non-player characters. We were all non-player characters. We were all the same. We could all experience joy and hate and despair and elation. As I thought about hitting that enter key and escaping the game, I felt grateful that whoever had designed the simulation had provided a way out that wasn't as messy as other ways people left the world. I realized that the strange occurrences at my daughter's apartment had been the simulation's way of trying to scare me away from this method of escape. Challenges to test my will. After all, it could have simply made the hard drive disappear, along with her computer, but it didn't. I wondered how many people knew about this, and I thought about all the people who simply went missing every year, never to be heard from again, gone without a trace. Poof. Maybe they all had been privy to this well-kept secret. Maybe they had simply been glitched out of existence. It didn't really matter. What mattered was that, even within the bounds of the simulation, I seemed to have free will. Maybe that was the whole point of this simulation, to see what seemingly intelligent beings with free will got up to in a world with finite rules and limitations. I stared down at the enter key, and I thought about my wife and daughter. They were gone forever. I could be too. Then I thought about all the joy they had brought me when they'd been around. Sure, times had been tough for us, but there were also plenty of good times. Times that made life worth living. I thought about the look on Mr. and Mrs. Templeton's faces when I'd reunited their daughter with them after arresting her abductor. I thought about the thank you notes I received every year from people whose lives I'd affected positively in my career. I thought about what it felt like to hug a good friend for the first time in a long time, about the feeling you get at the end of a good book, and about the simple pleasure of eating a slice of hot pizza or spongy cake. I thought about the excitement of sitting in a movie theater as the lights go down and the music starts, and about the inexpressibly joyous feeling of discovering a favorite song. I'd done a lot of good in the world. Did it matter that it was a simulation? If all those feelings were real to us, weren't they as real as anything could be? And if it was real, what did it matter that it wasn't true reality? I thought I'd made my decision, but now I wasn't so sure. A swirl of emotions, real emotions, thrashed inside me. I shook my head and raised my hand, and I positioned my finger just above the enter key. To escape or not. To live inside a false reality and do as much good as I could, or to give in. I took a deep breath, swallowed, and made my decision. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.